nobody in the world has ever brought a terminal lake back from collapse. In Salt Lake, we might be the first community to ever do that. We can actually do this thing and be the heroes of this story.
Welcome back to The Responsible Edge, the podcast exploring how to balance profit with purpose in an increasingly complex world. I'm Charlie Martin, your host and founder of TrueMark, and our article this week is titled Climate Communication: How Can We Bridge Divides?, which explores why climate debates are less about scientific evidence and more about identity, values, and how the message is framed. And I'm absolutely thrilled to say that my guest today to unpack all of this is Kim Grob, founding partner at Right On, a sustainability communications agency helping organizations translate complex environmental issues into stories that resonate with real audiences. Kim, it's an absolute delight to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for giving up some of your time.
Thank you so much for having me, Charlie.
Now, Kim, you have put up with some, I think, probably the worst technical issues we've ever had on The Responsible Edge at show 237. So thank you for being so, understanding as we've got things. But we're now talking, which is fantastic. For those of our listeners and viewers who are immediately like, ooh, Right On sounds like a very interesting organization and Kim sounds like a very interesting woman, can you just give us a bit more meat on the bones as to what your current work involves?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are focused on communications, content strategy, and storytelling for sustainability organizations. And that might be corporate sustainability, that might be nonprofits or foundations. So we work across all of those various areas. Our work spans everything from helping clients find their messages and define their audiences better, to helping them actually create the content from a writing and design perspective, and training. So helping them to take the information and the knowledge and continue to use it even when Right On is gone. So we do workshops.
I love it, Kim. So it's safe to say that on the basis of what we're going to be discussing today, I've got an absolute expert in the room, which is brilliant to have snaffled you for the show. Now, I want to understand, though, before we get into talking about climate communication more broadly, I want to understand a little bit more about you and your background and how on earth you ended up founding Right On and sort of what the inspiration was behind it. So just give some of our listeners and viewers, if you will, just a bit of a flavor as to your background.
Well, I grew up in Louisiana. So, it's very marshy, swamp all around, beautiful forests of pine trees, very different from where I live now, which is in Salt Lake City, Utah, which is very much a high mountain desert and a dry environment. But growing up in Louisiana, my mother would take me. We lived, when I was really young, we lived in an apartment in a little subdivision outside of New Orleans that, if you were on the road going into it, it kind of looks like a suburb. There's strip mall and different little businesses. But then you got into our subdivision and it was pretty scrappy. It was not anything fancy, but our little apartment, there was a creek behind it and some wood behind it. And my mom would take me out to what she called our special log. And it was just time when the two of us could take a little walk together and be alone in nature. And it was very important to me, a very special part of my childhood. And also it was a time for just, the two of us. But along the way, she was always pointing out she wasn't a naturalist. She wouldn't call herself a hiker, but she knew every plant. So she was pointing out every plant to me as we went along. And not in like a educational way, but this was how she lived in the world. And so she would point out the plants. We would stop and look at these amazing banana spiders, which are just huge, and they make these gorgeous giant webs. And so we'd stop to look at the banana spiders. Often would come across a snake, and we'd stop to look at the snakes. So I was never afraid of anything like snakes or spiders. We would stop and admire them. And I think with that background, I just always saw nature as magic, as this magic place that I could go to and learn something new every time I went. So I think from there, it was always in my spirit and in my heart and mind. It wasn't that I was always in nature, but it was just so imprinted at an early age.
It's amazing how many people come back to references. I'm going to completely segue out of this for a second, but there have been some brilliant magic wands recently on the show where people have spoken about like the ideas of getting leaders of the biggest companies in the world, the biggest CEOs of the world, to mandate a summer recess every year where they all had to get together at the same time and go and have an immersive experience in nature, and how in some way that might trigger like a collective understanding amongst these really powerful people about what it is that they should be trying to preserve. Do you think that, like, in light of the influence that these kind of experiences in nature, like you've described with your mother there growing up, is that why they're so important? Because they can fundamentally change minds if we want to experience it?
I think it is absolutely transformative. Another thing that I've been doing for decades now, and that I've brought my kids into, is a summer backpacking trip. So taking a backpacking trip in the summer where we are off the grid 100%. There's no connectivity. No one can reach me. I can't reach anybody. There's probably tech now that I could, but I don't know how to use it. So we really are off the grid.
If I've got to interrupt you. That's got to be the best out of office ever. Can you imagine the out of office mail? You'd say, yeah, I'm going to be out of office this time. There probably is technology that I've got on me that would allow you to contact me, but brilliantly, I don't know how to use it. So you will not hear from me again until this day. I love that.
I'm writing that down for this summer. I like that. So bringing my kids has been a really interesting experience because we've taken a lot of fantastic trips with them. We've gone all over the place. We've done a lot of neat things. But really our most simple trips of just, ourselves, some food, a pack, everything we need in that pack, and nature are the best trips they've ever taken, as a family.
How does that then influence like your work? Like what kind of, just give us a bit of a nutshell as to what you then did and then when Right On became your main focus.
So it took me a while to get to Right On. And about 15 years ago is when we started the agency. And when we started it, we had come from other big agencies where we'd done all kinds of work, a lot of tech. So I'd done a lot of B2B tech, had a lot of connections in that, and my partner did as well. Also a lot in healthcare and academia. So these were the experiences that we brought to the agency. And we started out by just taking all the projects that came our way. And all of them were, fascinating in their own ways. About 4 years ago now, we started looking at our portfolio of work, and we had quite a few sustainability clients that we had for a while. So before even ESG was a thing, we were doing corporate sustainability reports, about 10 years ago. And those clients had stayed with us, or they'd moved on to other places and brought us with us. And then, we started getting into helping clients with their ESG reports. And we realized that this was the work that was calling us, and that felt like what we wanted to direct our agency to do. And so we let go of some of the tech clients and some of the healthcare clients to make space for this. Now, we still have tech clients, but we're working on their sustainability content. We still have healthcare clients and we work on their sustainability. So all of that experience brought us to here, and we needed it to be able to do this work. I think we wouldn't be able to do our work if we didn't have those experiences too.
It's always like the test of authenticity as to making a commercial decision, which in the short term is perhaps detrimental in terms of moving clients on, but ultimately is with a real commitment to the longer term vision that you had for the agency. I have to ask you, Kim, I think lots of our listeners and viewers are going to be listening in. We're recording on, I think, the 6th of March, 2026. You're obviously based in the US, based in Utah, and we're in this crazy moment for the world. But in particular, when we talk about sustainability, everything, and people are lazily referring to this, but there's this whole notion of the, Trump-directed ESG backlash and watering down, if you like, going on in the US. How is that for you on the ground? And is that something that you are aware of? Is it something that we over on this side of the pond are making more of it than it is? Or just give us your lived experience of how things are with sustainability and sustainability communications in the US.
It's real. It is very present for all of our clients and for our agency. Last year was a little bit tougher, actually, because things were happening so fast. There were so many repeals. And of course, when we're talking about sustainability, we're not just talking about, environmental, but also the social side of things. So, there was a lot with DEI that was repealed, and there was just like we were scared to use. We are still scared to use certain words. There's a lot of clients who have had to just do like a delete and scrub of words like equity from their content because they don't want a target on their back and don't want to, be in the crosshairs of this administration. So yes, changing language to better align with this administration's goals so that we don't get programs canceled. And we just are, yes, it is hard. And a lot of people are just trying to figure out how to survive and continue doing the work. But on the positive side, what I will say is that the work is continuing. So the work continues. None of our clients have stopped doing any of their work. They may have had to make some decisions about how they communicate it and what language and message frames they use, but the work continues on. I can't say that's true for every corporation in America. I think some have definitely pulled back. But our clients are clients that are very far along on their sustainability journeys, so they're mature, and this is really baked into who they are as a company. So they're not going to be stopping.
This administration will come to an end. And at that point, when it comes to an end, what will likely be the outcomes that the organizations that have stayed true to their sustainability initiatives and their sustainability kind of commitments, if you like? I
think that they will emerge as the leaders, and that they will be that they will have a huge strategic advantage. I mean, we've already seen here in the U.S., a tale of two companies. You have Costco and Target, and Target really capitulated and pulled back a lot of their stuff that they were doing in terms of equity. Costco, they said no, we're continuing on. Sales after that immediately changed. Target dropped off. Costco went way up. So I think that's just, one small example of what I think will continue to the companies that are just continuing to do their work, the companies we work with, they will just emerge so much stronger at the end of this because, as we know, this work is all continuing, and this Trump administration can't stop it.
Kim, we're going to move forward now, if possible. Would you mind introducing and summarizing the article that I mentioned at the beginning, and perhaps just picking out from it anything that you found particularly interesting or noteworthy for our listeners and viewers?
Yes. So the article is named Climate Communication: How Can We Bridge Divides? So I was all in when you gave me that title, because this is something I've been thinking a lot about, actually since the beginning of the Trump administration in particular. But we should have all been thinking about it long before that, because this is a really important issue that's gotten in the way of effective communication for a long time. So like you mentioned at the intro of the show, I think that the article's point of view that the real issue when we're talking about climate goes beyond like the scientific facts, and it becomes an issue for most audiences. Unless you are a scientist, it becomes an issue of culture and identity. Like how does your tribe see these issues? And then like you use that as your mirror into how you are going to identify with the issues as well. So we all look through those filters. And the article really made it clear that that's an important consideration. And that we're falling short when we're trying to tell this story with data and science only. One really great thing that the article did that I think was great was it called out what are some of the frames that conservative audiences can get behind. And so it talked about economics, free market, disaster, public health, and nature, and also faith. So I think those buckets are not just conservative. Some of them are very clearly conservative issues that will like light up conservatives about issues, but some of them are just neutral framings, like nature.
Which of them are traditionally conservative positions?
Yeah, it would be, economic value and the free market focus. So the first that come to mind. I recently saw a campaign for the Tennessee Waste to Jobs Act. And Tennessee is a very conservative state here. And I watched their promo for this big initiative they have to get waste out of landfills statewide. But there was no talk of a climate crisis. There was no talk of climate at all. What they talked about was that it was legislation. It was going to generate millions of dollars. It was going to reduce our reliance on foreign materials. And it was going to create all these jobs at no cost to the taxpayer. Okay, that is so smart. Like that campaign, speaking to that audience, has such a better chance of breaking through.
Is it far too simple to say that we've had 25 years or so? I think I went to a talk beginning of this year, and we had the editor of the Financial Times was on the panel. She was previous editor. She's not there anymore, but she described it perfectly. And she said, how did she describe it? She said, we've had a catastrophe of climate communications over the first 25 years of this century. And she said, what we've done is we've implemented, as the article and you've alluded to, this very kind of more sort of, I guess, on the liberal side, more scientific side of, here's the scientific insight into the impact that all of this stuff is having on climate. And surely you would just change your behavior as a result of being somebody that now understands that the house is on fire, and you presumably want to try and put that fire out. is it too simple to say that we've tried that type of messaging, which is perhaps the sort of the more liberal, the more democratic kind of side of the aisle, if you like, in terms of positioning, and now we should just commit fully to a more conservative sort of positioning of climate-related communications, or is there a space for both?
There's a space for good communications that knows its audience. So I definitely don't think that we need to turn this dial to be talking about free market and cost all the time. I think these are really good business messages, though. If you're doing corporate sustainability, like, you should be talking about the cost benefits and the economic value of your work, not just, the trees and the birds. So I think that, most corporate sustainability does that really well. So I don't think that's like anything to wag a finger about. However, I do think that the bigger idea, I think, is to look for the neutral messaging frames. So not like going super conservative topic. Unless you're talking to a conservative audience. If your audience is conservative, you should absolutely be speaking their language. But in general, I think we need to look for things that appeal to a larger swath of people who we might be trying to talk to. Have you followed any of the work by Potential Energy?
No.
They're great. And they've done some global message testing and to look at what resonates. And one of their biggest insights is that we need to be talking about, we can all agree that we want to protect what we love for future generations. That's something that most people will agree on. So I think we need to start there with things that we can all come together on and that aren't polarizing.
I'm not a scientist myself. I know what I know, and I think I'm a fairly well-informed person who understands what's going on, but certainly not an expert. But for those that are deniers of there being any climate-related issues going on, then that message that you've just described is not going to land with them because they don't acknowledge that there is any detrimental impact that any of our behaviors are having upon the environment. So how do we get into, I know that's an extreme example at how do you go about communicating climate to climate deniers, but I'd be fascinated to get your view on that.
I think that's a great question. I think that another thing that the message testing from Potential Energy found was that local messages land much better than global messages. So if we go back to the message I said, protecting what we love for future generations, if we're talking about saving the world for future generations, it's not going to land. But if we think about that creek that I spoke about at the beginning of the episode that I loved and that was special to my mother and I, and to all the people who lived in that neighborhood, no matter who they were voting for or what they believed politically, I think that's the key. We need to look at this from a very local, hyper-local angle and help people to think about the places that they love. And even if they don't believe in climate change, they know that there's development. They know that places where they hunt could end up turning into a subdivision. They know this is possible. So those are the ways that I think we reach people who really don't care or think about climate change or think it's a problem. They do care about these places where they fish, where they hunt, where they hike. And I think we can look at it from that local perspective. Here in Salt Lake, I think this is international news, but we have a terminal lake, the Great Salt Lake, that is in really bad shape. And it's on the brink of disappearing. It has taken this entire region working together to be able to potentially bring this terminal lake back. And this is a very conservative state too. So we have, our very supermajority Republican legislature working on this, our Republican governor working on this, farmers who, have to be involved in it as well because we have so much water redirecting that we have to do to save this lake. So I think it's a great example of how we need to have an issue that's local that everybody understands the significance of.
Is there something about timing as well? Because again, as we all know, if you kick things into the long grass and you start putting long-term timeframes on things, people talk about 2030, which I know is not way anymore, but 2050, etc. Does that, again, if it's too big and it's too long term, okay, I've got to put food on my plate, I've got to worry about the here and now, I've got to think about local, that's just too much to take on board. Is that important when it comes to messaging as well?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what we're seeing with the Great Salt Lake for sure. There was a science, a big report that came out on it that said we've got 4 years, and so that changes everything. When you really realize that this is something that has to be solved right here and now, or it's going to impact everyone's way of life in the Salt Lake Valley. It's not just that the migratory birds aren't going to have a place to stop, which is actually huge. But this lake has so much industry that's attached to it, and it's an economic driver for the state. It creates lake effect snow, which gives us the snow that powers our ski industry here. So yeah, I mean, it has to happen now, or our way of life as we know it changes, and really we can't even live here anymore.
I want to ask you something, Kim. I spoke to somebody recently who was talking about one of the potential impacts of AI on all of this, and how, and I just want to get your sort of reflection or comment on this. And they were saying how, because AI is going to allow us to produce these much more sophisticated, much more accurate ways of forecasting, it's going to change things in terms of these 5 years or 10 years or whatever. And people are going to be able to get really specific and say, look, based upon current activity, this problem that we've identified is going to become a real issue and cause huge damage, etc. on, the 17th of April, 2028 at this particular time, and be able to get really, really specific based upon the accuracy of the kind of calculations that AI can facilitate. And the idea that this person was talking to you about is that that's going to create that kind of immediacy in terms of action, the exact date, the exact time when a problem might sort of present itself. What are your thoughts on that concept and the impact that it could have?
Yeah, I think, anything we can do to better visualize what the challenges are that we face, so that they don't feel abstract to us anymore. That anything we can do to be more specific, thinking about this from a communications perspective, specificity is the key. So if we can make this very accurate and specific, I think that's good. I think one thing that we need to really think about in terms of how we communicate this, though, is that we know that doom and gloom messages do not work. So we have to be really careful that we take this information that we have and we tell the stories in a way that is optimistic but realistic. So I'm not talking about being Pollyannish about things, but there's got to be some hope in order for people to not feel paralyzed and actually take action.
And how does that reflect in terms of the briefs that you work on with like clients? Like how does that play out in terms of how you guys go about? I mean, let's be frank, like there are, the overall rhetoric when it is, that things are not good. Can you give us some examples of work that you've done where it has sort of lended itself to more of that kind of aspirational view of, what could be if we get our act together?
Yeah. Well, I want to start with one that actually is about the Great Salt Lake, and it's not a campaign that I worked on, but it's been so moving to me that I'll share this one. And the message that I've been hearing, and I think it came from an organization called Grow the Flow, but now it's, as messages start to become repeated, they become everybody's message. So the message that I've been hearing in Salt Lake recently is nobody in the world has ever brought a terminal lake back from collapse. In Salt Lake, we might be the first community to ever do that. So this works so well. I mean, it admits that the lake is on the brink of collapse, but it also says that we have a chance to do something no one else has done before. And it almost kind of gamifies it too. Like we can actually do this thing and be the heroes of this story. So to me, that was just such a powerful way to tell the story of what we're going through right now.
Yeah, as you say, that hero storytelling around, let's be the firefighters. Like if the narrative is that the world is on fire, well, look, let's share stories of heroic firefighting that's going on. And I think that's a beautiful example that you've shared there, Kim. I want to ask you one final thing about obviously, as you've described when you've introduced yourself, like you're a, environmentally conscious person yourself and you really value nature and the experience of it. Like what role does or can communications play in helping to improve things? Like, because obviously you and I both work in the communication space, like what is the potential for it? Is it that kind of silver bullet that if we get it right, it can really affect things, or are we kind of overstating its importance?
I mean, I'm biased, but I think the importance cannot be overstated. I think that we have got to get this right. It is like the missing piece that we haven't gotten right yet and that we have such a huge opportunity with. I think that we need to learn how this can help people and inspire people to take action. It can change the way we think, it can change the way we feel, and it can change the actions that we take. And I think coming from a marketing background and working on all different types of clients across, tech, healthcare, beauty, real estate, anything, you name it, I've probably written something about it in the past. But I think that this same principles that we use across all of these different types of marketing campaigns have to be applied to our sustainability communications. And, marketing sometimes gets a bad rap in sustainability because I think it can be associated with greenwashing, and it can feel kind of icky and not noble compared to, what everybody is doing who cares so much about these things. But this is the missing link. I think when we get this right, when we realize that the way we tell stories changes how people think, feel, and act, then we have such a better chance of meeting our climate goals.
If possible now, I'm going to hand over a magic wand, which I'm fascinated to see what you're going to do with this. If I was to hand you a magic wand, Kim, and you could change one thing about the commercial world this instant, what would that one thing be?
I want to change the objects of desire. So I want to, our objects of desire right now are, luxury homes, for instance, and fancy this and that. And I'd like to switch that object of desire to sustainable behaviors. And it's already starting to happen, I think. I think that secondhand shopping, for instance, would be a good example of one that's starting to have its moment. But let's make that the sexy thing, like buying clothes secondhand, plant-based diets, more kind of high-end plant-based restaurants. And I think just helping to inspire sustainable lifestyles rather than telling people what they can't do. So, don't drive your car. Don't, eat meat. Instead, show how wonderful and amazing eating a plant-based diet can be, or how cool it is, like Gen Z is showing us, to buy your clothes secondhand, because then you have things that are completely original and look like nobody else. So I think we need to, that's my magic wand. We shift the objects of desire.
I think it's a great and a wonderful suggestion. And I think there's something, I was speaking to somebody recently and we were talking about social media and the influence of obviously social media on the way that we frame kind of objects of desire and our kind of motivations and intentions as a kind of a global community, if you like. And the sense that this guest had was that things are shifting a bit. Like there is, obviously there's a lot of, the Lamborghini driving, make as much money as you possibly can, realize these kind of symbols, if you like, traditional symbols of wealth and success. But there is also a growing community of people that are managing to get the message through that, one of the greatest status symbols that you can have is to be fit and healthy and to be in good shape as you get older. And what's really interesting about that is that that's sort of provided to you by having a degree of restraint when it comes to this consumption side of things, when it comes to the food that you engage with, and how actually having less material possessions allows you to live a freer life. And we're beginning to get some of these stories and narratives come through, aren't we? So are you hopeful that what you've described is something that we are trending towards, or do you think that something more magical needs to happen in order for this to get over the line?
I'm hopeful. I think that we are getting there, and I think that society is changing. It certainly has in my lifetime. So I am hopeful that we will get there. I think more awareness and messaging to show us the way would be good. More influencers who show these lifestyles as desirable and irresistible even.
Here. And more, as we've kind of alluded to before when we were talking about heroes and firefighters, like, as you say, we need more of that aspirational story and that individual to follow. So, if there are any listening in that are thinking about setting themselves up as influencers on social media, from Kim and myself, I think we can say, go ahead and do it. Do it now.
Let's do it.
Kim, that was absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for joining me for an episode of the show. I've learned a lot and it's been a really interesting reflection. So thank you.
Oh, I'm so delighted to be on it. It was so fun to talk with you, Charlie.
And that's all for today's episode of The Responsible Edge. A big, big thank you to Kim Grob for joining me on today's show. As a reminder, this episode was brought to you by TrueMark, the mark of trusted sustainability communications. Visit truemark.com to learn more. I'm Charlie Martin. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. See you next time.